I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. So you've told me off already.
What? I've told you off already?
Yeah, I had my intro all ready to go and you said no. You
don't go in swinging.
I was going looking for a head and a plate.
Yeah. Well,
but anyway, you think I should be a little bit more
circumspect.
So I will. So in other words, what we're going to talk about today is how Liam Byrne was caught and what charges he's facing are relating to the Encrochat phone hack. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, I've been really steady on this.
Very good.
Okay, so far so good.
So far so good.
So my point, my crib, whatever you'd call it, has always been that across the UK, Northern Ireland, into the Netherlands, France, and various other countries that were involved in Encrochat, that there is a constant stream of people before the courts, many of whom plead guilty and are just simply jailed. There has been a huge amount of seizures, or there certainly was initially, of seizures of cash, of guns, of drugs. There was warehouses found. There was, drug laboratories found, all the rest of this. And everybody else seems to be literally wiping the board with the information that they've used in Encrochat, except...
Well, go on, you finish it.
Except Ireland.
Yeah. So Liam Byrne, obviously, as he was arrested this week, the NCA, the National Crime Agency in the UK, put out that it related to Encrochat messages. For anybody who doesn't know, these are encrypted messages sent on normal telephone or normal mobile telephones that were part of a major hack. So we know, therefore, that Liam Byrne, whose primary business was in the UK and Ireland, was using this network. Now, these figures might be slightly wrong because they're being updated all the time. But in the UK alone, it was 2,631 people were arrested as a result of the Encrochat bust, and 1,364 charged. Now, that was the most recent figures I could find. It's probably even more now at this stage. Now, there was loads of seizures. There arguably was a load of seizures in Ireland. We just don't know if those seizures came as a result of Encrochat or intelligence. But we do know there's nobody arrested or charged, nobody facing charges as a result of the Encrochat bust in Ireland. That's what we do know.
I don't think there was a load of seizures either.
Well, there may have been seizures, and those seizures came as a result of intelligence shared as a result of the Encrochat bust. They're not put down to that. There may be or there may not, we don't know. But we know for a fact that there
isn't an increase in Ireland at the same time the other countries are enjoying the increase that they did from Encrochat.
Certainly if you look at the final product, which is people arrested and people charged.
Yeah.
So if you look at in the UK, 1,364 charged, which is, roughly 10 times, the UK is roughly 10 times the size of Ireland, maybe more. So that would lead you to believe there should be something like 120, 130 people charged in Ireland as a result of Encrochat, if it was proportionate. But obviously we don't have any. So this is your bugbear, is that the
bugbear? It really is, because I looked at this initially in 2020 when it happened, and I did a kind of like a big, like a podcast that took me a long time to make.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of digging around it, and I just couldn't work out why we didn't have any. I thought I was just literally missing something.
Yeah.
Until I was told basically that the reason we didn't have any Encrochat cases is because we were given the information, but that the Crime and Security Division didn't pass it on.
Right.
So what we'll do is I'll just go through what happened first, will we?
Yeah, start off, because it is sort of
it is a bit complex, and I just have some notes about what has happened with encrypted phone networks in Europe. And the first of them to be taken down was a network called Phantom Secure.
Yeah.
which was set up by a guy called Danny Manupasa, the server based in Canada in 2008. Now, he was a businessman with no convictions
Yeah.
in crime. And he believed that, his website said he believed in people's privacy. And he had developed these phone systems where everything was taken off the phone. So they never used Apple, but say this was a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
They stripped it of the camera and anything that could trace it,
Yeah.
and literally brought it back to, sort of, from my understanding, my very, very limited technical understanding, they brought it back to a phone that was almost like the old school Nokias you might give to a kid under the age of 12. And then they started out with that, and they built up what was basically an app for the phone. You could communicate from one phone to the other, and the server of Enetcom held that information. They had little things on it that you could delete it from. You could make a phone call to the headquarters and they would delete everything on your phone. It was highly secure. And the FBI basically started coming across these phones and during raids for crimes they were investigating. And they worked out that these were really strange. They sent them to their technical experts and they basically said, these are very peculiar, but they'd be very handy for people involved in crime.
Yeah, because
they're like a walkie-talkie system.
Yeah, and the basics which we hear all the time in court cases where this phone, as we heard say in the Regency, the phone associated with one of the accused bounced off this tower, and then those texts could be recovered. None of that is obviously possible with an encrypted phone.
No.
That what goes. It's on a totally different network and there's just no record of it. So you can see the obvious benefits for.
And you can see when they start coming in there, and that was in 2008, he set that up.
Yeah.
So by the time they started kind of getting, word got out within criminal networks that these were really handy. I think by the time the FBI actually raided them, there was 20,000 of them all over the world. Now, when they did raid this Phantom Secure thing, they discovered a number of things. One was that they were already on to the next generation.
Yeah.
They were creating the next generation. And there was an individual involved in working on that who went to work for the FBI. And that was the beginning of ANOM.
Yeah.
Which is a much later hack, which only happened in the last, I think in 2021 it happened. And it was where the FBI had actually owned the network and went out into the field and sold it into criminal groupings. The Americans always have to go a step further than everyone else, don't they?
Yeah,
they've got to do things bigger and better.
Yeah, they didn't actually hack it, they actually built it,
they owned
and let it run.
Exactly. And sold it and physically sold it. So, I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to, I don't know, could you do that in this side of the world? Probably not with all the, but I mean, that was between themselves and the Australians, they did that. But we'll come back to that later. Interestingly, after Ramos was arrested and he was placed before the courts under that RICO legislation, it was discovered there was a bank account discovered here in Ireland that he had 500,000 in. He had set it up through a company. He was
kind of he was doing a Google on it, for want of a better word. He had a kind of a what do they call a plate. He had in theory, he had a company set up here.
Yeah.
He'd never been here, I think.
He'd never been. I think he'd been on the phone and came across very respectable, nothing illegal as regards setting up the company. But he was using it. There was some explanation given that it was wherever we are in the banking time zone, we're in a really good place.
Yeah.
For the
I think he had an address somewhere in the IFSC, did it that he'd never had an office, but it was
PO
one
box,
of these PO
probably.
box, something along those lines.
And actually, 2 members of the Criminal Assets Bureau went out to the States and met him in his prison cell with this section, whatever they call them, 4As, which was, are you happy to hand over these funds to the Irish state? And he just signed it. And I'd say it was the quickest and easiest money the cab and the Irish Exchequer ever earned. But anyway, Ramos is where he is now. In the meantime, there had been other companies set up because he might have been the first of these encrypted phone networks, but it very quickly caught on.
And they were charging something like the users of it were charged something like between 1,000 and 1,500 a month, was it? For use of the Encrochat network.
And I suppose that was for your...
that was the equivalent of your bill, basically.
Your bill, exactly. Yeah.
You know?
And then you had to pay quite a bit of money for the actual
handset
in the first place.
Yeah.
So I suppose they did deals for people. I mean, if you were a salesman on one of these encrypted phone networks and you brought in the Kinahans, you'd probably do them a deal.
Yeah,
you probably
get 40 or 50 handsets, and that'd be 50 grand. 50 to 70 grand a month that they would get for that.
Exactly. So now Encrochat, which is what we're talking about. Encrochat phone hack, it was a first for policing because it was the first time that they conducted what they call a live hack. And it started in 2020. And over a 3-month period, the Dutch and the French police, they discovered the server of the Encrochat network, which was in France.
Yeah.
And the Dutch had worked out how to get...
I think they worked out how to get into it.
Decrypt it, basically.
Yeah.
So, this was an extraordinary thing. Nobody knew what was happening whatsoever. The Encrochat phones had been widely distributed and sold among criminal networks in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in England, in Northern Ireland, and in France. And basically, over a 3-month period, they watched this sensational thing happening live, which was the criminal underworld talking to one another without using code, without bothering, because they were on these, what they believed were these bulletproof phones. And, when they saw something like about to go off, like a torture or somebody was about to be kidnapped, they would move in and stop that happening. Any threat to life, they reacted to wherever that happened. But they hoped that they weren't going to give themselves away.
Yeah, I think they also even carried out drug busts, didn't they? Like, if these drugs are going to land, and the police would be there, and people would presume that they had some sort of human intelligence rather than hacked into the phones.
I think they chose what they went for because they didn't want to alert anyone to the fact that they had this incredible window into the underworld.
Yeah.
So they did definitely choose what they
intervened in.
Exactly. But the rest of it, what happened was it was collected by the Dutch and the French, and hundreds of thousands of messages. And what they did was they would send it, if it was English related criminality, they would send it straight to the NCA headquarters. They were divvying it up. They were working out if this was in Liverpool, if it was in Manchester, if it was in Birmingham. They would send the intelligence onwards to those various regions, who would then break it up further, some of them like in Liverpool, and send it out to the local police stations, essentially, or the local detective teams, who would have been trying to police various criminals. They probably knew a lot of them were criminals, but this was actually telling them, right, they're moving drugs, they're meeting this person.
And the values, I think, is what they were really shocked with, the amount of money involved.
Exactly. And also a lot of white-collar workers were caught up who were taking money in the ports, in the local authorities. Some police officers were caught in it. And so they were gathering all this. But nonetheless, they took the information and they did pass it on down to local police forces. Sometimes the local police forces moved in over the hack period. Sometimes they waited.
Yeah.
But altogether then, in the April of 2020, they moved in. And it was at that point in the UK alone, and this was the early days, so the figures I'm going to give were the ones that happened immediately.
Yeah.
They had 746 suspects were arrested.
Yeah, that was straight away.
That was straight away.
Yeah.
The same day, the network, the Encrochat network itself, the company itself, realised it was being hacked.
Yeah.
And they sent out an SOS to all the phones telling all the individuals, all their customers, dump your phone.
Yeah.
There's a hack ongoing.
And they realised that, of course, because of a case in the north of Ireland, which was the first one to come through.
The leaky bucket that it is up there.
Involving, because somebody was brought to court, and that was part of the evidence given against them in court, and that brought it to an end. Now, that person was actually from Connacht, the Connacht area, but he can't be named now because of a court order.
And what happened? Was the prosecution gave the evidence?
The prosecution sort of went to court, and obviously they had to say, how can you prove this? They give a preliminary amount of evidence in court hearings, and the Encrochat was mentioned then, that there was going to be these decrypted messages, basically. And I think that was the first alert. It was certainly the first court case. And at that point then, the Encrochat, the people running the network, warned everybody.
Yeah.
And
They
then,
must have been ready to move at the same time.
yeah, I think
because
they knew
they
it was
were-
coming to court at some point.
They must have known that it was coming to an end, the live hack, because, I mean, the police forces in France and Belgium and the Netherlands and the UK, they had all systems ready to go. Like
Yeah.
they had all the
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously going to come. And I think in the case in the north, there was a potential shooting involved.
Probably, yeah.
So there was planning going on, or it's alleged that there was planning going on. So they moved in. They couldn't obviously sit back and allow something like that to occur, you know?
So the UK, anyway, 746 suspects on that day they moved in. There was £54 million seized in cash.
Yeah.
54 million.
And actually, the latest figure, it's went up to 75 in
Right.
cash. And that's in the UK alone.
Follow-up search.
Yeah,
the UK
yeah.
alone. 77 firearms.
Yeah,
That was on the first day. And 2 tons of drugs.
yeah.
And several suspected corrupt police and law enforcement officers were identified under the operation code named Venetic.
Yeah.
The Dutch launched their own wave of drug raids and arrests, uncovering 8,000 kilos of cocaine, 12,000 kilos of crystal meth, and they dismantled 19 synthetic drug labs. They found the torture chamber, which we referred to in the show, which was hidden in a shipping container. And they brought countless people. I don't have the figures of how many they brought to court, but it's been a huge amount. Now,
So what happened in Ireland?
so what happened in Ireland was absolutely nothing.
Well,
Right? So what happened in Ireland was the information came in the same way.
so
But
that,
instead of being disseminated and sent on down through the ranks
yeah,
to the local officers who could have acted on it, who could have launched investigations, who maybe needed to move in at times, because we don't even know that. We don't even know, did any of the information that involved, immediate...
yeah, but just say like a shipment of drugs arriving in Dublin port, and they have been told the Gardaí received this intelligence. It goes to crime and security, which is a separate division, and they may have sent that. Not saying this is discovered over an Encrochat.
Yeah.
So they might have contacted Dublin Central Office and said, we've intelligence that £4 million worth of cocaine is due to land tonight, and they may have gone on and busted it.
They may
have, but we don't know.
There would also be a kind of like within crime fighting, I suppose, there is nowadays an attitude that picking up 4 million quid's worth of coke is absolutely pointless.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past they would have picked up the drugs and been happy to destroy it. It's just a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
You're far better off to wait for people with hands on it to try and dismantle the gangs, and to know when to move in and all the rest of it.
But we don't know. But you can presume some of that went as intelligence, right? And there may have even been, Gardaí may have even intervened in, say, if some shooting was planned. They may have got the intelligence, and they may have...
Well, you'd like to think they did.
Well, you would like to.
You'd like to think that
But
they
they
at
got
very
the...
least intervened in threats to life.
Yeah.
You'd
But
like to think that.
and have the Gardaí, what have they ever said on this? Like,
So basically, they said nothing from the beginning, and then when I was asking them, when I was doing this podcast, and they said that they didn't discuss operational things to do with Garda Siochana, and slowly, it sort of basically started to emerge. They have been kind of pushing out a narrative through a lot largely unnamed sources. I think there was actually a piece shortly afterwards, and shortly after I started asking some questions in the Irish Times, in which an unnamed source, senior source, ranking source within the Garda Síochána said that there was no point in passing it on, that we used it as we sort of kept it as intelligence. There was no point in making any arrests because they weren't going to work anyway.
Yeah.
And they were going on the basis that this was going to be challenged and it wouldn't work through the courts. Which very quickly, I think, okay, maybe you can accept that. Maybe they have legal advice and they have far bigger brains than I have, people in senior positions in the Garda Síochána and within the legal system that advise them.
yeah.
But when it sort of started to happen, like in the UK and in Northern Ireland, we're seeing more and more people just pleading guilty because they've actually been caught because the intelligence is so good, because it's coming from themselves.
Yeah.
Essentially, they've been caught hands-on with the weapons, hands-on with the cash. They've been caught moving drugs. They've been caught in positions that they plead guilty because the evidence is so strong against them.
Exactly. And it's in their favour to offer a guilty plea at a relatively early date. They're going to get, 20, 30, 40% off their sentence. So they've repeatedly, most of the
cases we see, they do plead guilty.
Yeah, most of the convictions have resulted.
And even if there was a court case around the kind of how the evidence was gathered, if you've pleaded guilty, you're gone anyway.
Yeah.
There's no point.
No,
there's no point in you taking a court case then and saying, actually, I'm only a bit guilty. Because,
I'm not guilty anymore now that I might get off of it. Mm-hmm. But there have been challenges, of course, because there is, there's obviously a privacy issue there. These privacy disputes are always complicated. But when they get to court, I'm going to summarise it basically. Like the courts in Ireland and in the UK, which were a very similar model, a lot of what they're saying broadly is, of course, there's privacy issues, but if there's a threat to life or something very, very serious, those privacy issues can be overwritten by the need for urgency.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's sort of a summation of the challenges against the Encrochat hack that have been brought by people suspected of crimes in the UK.
It was illegally gathered information, basically, but it's failed.
Yeah.
It's failed in France.
Yeah.
Challenge. It's failed in the Netherlands, and it's now failed in England.
Yeah.
So the over caution of Ireland, of the Garda Siochana, to do nothing with the information and bring nobody to court has kind of proved to be possibly a bad decision.
Yeah.
Which I don't think the Garda Síochána, despite their their efforts to change.
Yeah.
I mean, Drew Harris was put in there to totally overturn
But the culture, he was brought in to change the culture.
But it is a culture when you can't admit that you've made a wrong decision. It is a culture when you circle the wagons.
Yeah.
Because an individual has made, or a team have made a decision which is catastrophically wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, very quickly after the Encrochat hack, and when members of the police forces from all these countries I talk about, and you were privileged to be part of getting this intelligence. It didn't go to everybody. It went to member countries who were kind of had good communication skills with one another. And one after the other, those countries stood up and came out and said this was a sort of a golden moment in the fight against organised crime.
Yeah.
That this was it. It was happening here and now. They had this window into the underworld they had never before seen. These opportunities to break down these criminal networks that they'd never had before. Yeah,
because you can see why the great opportunity exists, because, as you said, traditionally, definitely in this country, but all other countries as well, they've been able to catch guys red-handed in possession of big quantities of drugs, but they've rarely been the top guys, have they? They're the middle level, the guys who receive the drugs and hand over the money. And what the Encrochat allowed them to do was catch the next level up, the guys who were directing the guys who were collecting the drugs.
Yeah.
So they were able to, the guys who would never be physically in the presence of £4 million worth of coca landing in the port, but they were able to prosecute people who were directing those guys, and they wouldn't really have had a chance at getting at them too easily otherwise.
Or else, huge amount of resources going into it.
Yeah.
You said there that you hoped, or we don't know whether this information was passed on. In an interview this week, the former Assistant Commissioner John O'Driscoll, who was in charge of the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, who are the central unit to handle all things drugs and organised crime, said that he never received that information while he was in the position in the job.
Yeah.
So the information didn't go to the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. So therefore, it didn't go outside crime and security.
John O'Driscoll obviously was, really came to the fore, I suppose, after the Regency, and in bringing the Kinahan Cartel really to their knees. So, that says something, the fact that he is saying that, because he was right on the front line.
Yeah.
Now,
and he didn't receive a single piece of intelligence from the Encrochat hack.
And, can we? Well, like we, we certainly know that people that were very high up in the Kinahan organisation were using Encrochat. We know that because we can name.
Because it's also the other piece of narrative that was pushed out through probably the Garda's PR division, that firstly, that there was no point in getting involved in this because cases were going to be taken and everything would fall. Secondly, within that Irish Times interview as well, was the suggestion that the Irish criminals didn't use Encrochat anyway. So there was no point in us doing anything with it.
Yeah. But we now know, at least we know Liam Byrne was using it for a start. Mm-hmm. We know it is alleged that Bomber Kavanagh's son, who's also been picked up, was using it. We also know that Thomas Marr, who was a key logistical supplier for the Kinahans, trucker who was moving money and drugs. We know he was using it, and we know that he was using it to collect money from Ireland because that featured in his case when he was prosecuted in the UK. We know other people that were very closely linked to the Kinahans were using it because of cases that have come through. For example, Liam Cornish, known as the Lamb, who was a Liverpool criminal and who lived in the Costa del Sol and was really regarded as probably the Kinahans' man in Liverpool, like a very famous or infamous criminal over there. Like he was using it because that featured in his court case. So we know all sorts of people associated with Irish criminals were using it. So,
and I mean, it's come up in the case. We know that Graham the Whig Whelan had one.
Yes.
Who is based here in Ireland.
Yeah.
We also know that a number of criminals over the border, some of whom we can't mention.
Some of whom we can't mention.
But some of whom we can, and that they were using them and they have gone through, some of them have been processed through the courts and are being processed through the courts. These are cross-border gangs. These are gangs that are working on both sides of the border. So why there would be a black hole in Ireland's criminal underworld that nobody here had an Encrochat phone is beyond me.
Exactly. And I mean, we know people from the Kinahan network. There's people connected with the Mr. Big network.
Yeah.
Currently facing charges in the north. You know, people
on Encrochat.
On Encrochat phones and the Encrochat, the details of their text messages on Encrochat have been detailed in court. These people haven't been found guilty yet, but these are, key associates of Mr. Big, the Dublin criminal. So,
and in the UK, Peter Fatso Mitchell also washed up in the Encrochat hack. Like, he was once the king of the Costa. He was the guy that was there, that was the Irish bloke in charge around Portabanus before the Kinahans sort of landed in and started muscling in on his territory. He actually left the Costa del Sol and Portabanus in 2008, not long after his friend Paddy Doyle was shot dead.
Yeah.
At the time, the Kinahan organisation put out that Paddy Doyle was shot dead by the Russians.
Yeah.
But we know now that it was an in-house job and that Gary Hutch, his childhood friend, was not only involved but returned to carry his coffin and to tell his parents that the Russians had done it. I think that kind of double cross, that kind of turning in on their own is an MO of what that Kinahan organisation were and probably are like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they whenever they did order the execution of one of their own, they did tend to follow it up with a
rumour
and a narrative, and did tend to, for example, somebody like Hatchet Kavanagh, when he was killed in Spain, the Kinahans were floating around telling, putting it out that they had nothing to do with it, and this foreign gang did it, and that foreign gang did it. But sure, we know now it was
them.
It was them.
And then he lured his son into Daniel Kinahan, lured the son into his gym.
Yeah, he was a talented boxer, nothing to do with crime. Jamie Kavanagh.
Sorry for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Peter Mitchell actually became sort of a victim of that double cross by the Kinahan organisation. He actually survived because the shooter, he was sitting outside Paparazzi Bar, which is a bar he owned, and it was really a meeting place actually for criminals from all over to do their business. But the gunman approached, shot, and then sort of tripped, stumbled, and I think the gun jammed, and Fatso Mitchell was able to dive for cover. Fatso Mitchell was previously a member of John Gilligan's gang. He was always known as the one who got away. He, I think, went first to Amsterdam and remained in the company of John Traynor for a while after the.
Yeah, they were living together in a
were,
sort of a house outside Amsterdam.
House sharing.
House sharing, yeah.
After the Gilligan gang sort of separated, they both managed to.
Yeah, I think they were still heavily involved in the drugs trade, particularly in the UK. But Fatso Mitchell ultimately was convicted or he was caught in January 2022, transporting, I think it was £1.4 million worth of cocaine, was it?
Yeah, I mean, he was found in Wales.
Yeah.
And he got 10 years for his role in this, they called it the Avengers Coke Gang. He was basically transporting it as in driving. He was actually driving it. He had really kind of fallen from the heights where he was. And he had basically stayed in touch, I think, with George Mitchell. Was the supply coming through him? We don't know. But he was with this kind of crew down there in Wales, and he was lifted because of Encrochat.
Yeah.
Now, there's no doubt that he was still supplying parts of Ireland as well and keeping his, he still would have had major contacts back here. Again, maybe nobody he knew or liked would use an Encrochat phone in this country. I'm just being facetious about that. But yeah, I mean, I do think it irks me that a bad decision was made.
Well, I mean, so I suppose like decisions are made all the time. So just say the government make a decision on, like they've had some controversial legal advice and they've made decisions about it. Some, remember there was recently ones to do, say, with the Children's Hospital or whatever, not to get into it. So they make a decision on the advice of their lawyers. What happens then is they become accountable for that decision. Mm-hmm. They become accountable. They get questioned in the Dáil. They stand up and have to defend it. They get questioned in the media. They stand up and they have to defend it. It becomes part of a public discussion. People ring up Joe Duffy and give out about it or whatever. And sometimes things are learned and government policy can either change or else the government can say this is what we have to continue to do. Either way, the public are informed and they have an opinion because the government have to stand by what they've done. I suppose the issue with something like Encrochat and the Gardai is at what point, even if they've made the decision that they made with the best intentions, which is, I believe they probably did, how do they then become accountable? And do they have to stand up and get asked questions about it? Do they come to the Dáil and get questioned about it? Do they put themselves out for interviews? Does somebody from Crime and Security go on Joe Duffy and defend the decision? The problem is that doesn't happen. So
none of the above happens. In actual fact, they just, I think, have a pretty easy out all the time to hide behind that one sweeping statement that this is just part of, this is for security reasons, we can't discuss this.
Yeah.
I mean, you're obviously not looking for the ins and outs of
no, you're not looking for
what information there was within those messages, but why the decision was made not to act upon that live intelligence.
Yeah.
And not to move with the other countries, to be the outrider, to be the only ones that sat and did nothing with the information, but stored it as intelligence. I do think that there is a point there that they could explain that. I think, I think they're run on taxpayers' money. This is an organisation that, these are public servants.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think that is the way democracies work. Like, people make decisions, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. But then the way in which things get fixed or improved is through public discussion. I mean, it might be a messy process if you're a government minister and you have to stand up and defend certain decisions you've made. And, but ultimately that is how things get changed. So the no discussion, like, I don't
There's
think...
there has been a culture within crime and security, which is this secrecy. And we saw it during the Regency trial.
Yeah.
It became ridiculous when there were certain questions being asked which were absolutely bland.
Yeah.
Absolutely bland. And each and every person that was from within that part of the organisation was discussing tradecraft. And we can't say that. We can't tell you anything about that because It's tradecraft. I mean, there was a point during that trial, I'm sure I was getting all worked up about it, but it was like, we know that you bug people.
Yeah.
We know that's how policing works. Like, everybody knows that phones are listened to, and it's not a big secret.
No.
The criminals know it.
Yeah.
The public know it.
I mean, there's obviously a difference if you say, like, what type of bug where do you buy your bugs, and, what sort of network do you use or something. Obviously, nobody is suggesting that sort of information could become, or what do they look like, how small are they?
Not at all. Nobody even wanted to know that.
But the fact that they exist, and so it is an issue. And then, of course, the other issue is...
It's living in the dark ages, Niall. I mean, it's absolutely... I mean, modern policing is all about these technological advances. It's all about breaking these encrypted networks and using these encrypted messages to jail. Look at the Netherlands and Ridwan Taghi and all those cases.
Yeah.
They're all based on evidence from the phones
Yeah.
and the encrypted networks. And it is modern policing.
It's also modern policing. Part of modern policing is to be accountable to the public in a different way than they previously were.
Yeah.
So if you look in the UK, I'm not saying the UK is perfect in every way, but they do expect to be grilled in a way that doesn't really happen to Irish police. They expect to be accountable to the public, not just to... So, I mean, there is... Look, sometimes in this is a kind of a controversial thing in journalism, but there's a difference between somebody giving a briefing off the record and about, say, Encrochat, and somebody standing up in a press conference and answering questions in detail, because the person giving a briefing isn't accountable for something if they say something that's incorrect.
Yeah.
Sure they're not.
No. And whoever gets the briefing is going to believe that they have this sort of exclusive.
Yeah.
And they're going to run with it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
Yeah.
And that's what does happen.
Yeah.
And that's what has happened as regards Encrochat in particular.
And not just the police. It happens with politicians. It happens in other areas where politicians will fly these kites, as they call, and they'll say we're going to raise taxes by whatever 2%, and they'll give it to a political journalist. And then they don't have to be held accountable for it if all of a sudden it goes wrong and people are up in arms. No minister has to say, well, I do believe we should raise taxes by 2%. So they because it's anonymous, it's not the same.
A year after Encrochat, there was the Sky ECC hack, which was the next one, and it was the Swiss were involved in that, along with the French again, and the Dutch, who are the world leaders in cracking these encrypted messaging services. And Sky ECC, actually it was the Belgians, the Dutch and the French were the first stood together in Europol to say they'd listened live on these phones. A load of Encrochat customers immediately jumped to Sky ECC, so it was kind of a double whammy for them. And they had listened live on that for 3 weeks, and they had decrypted 500 million messages. And I remember speaking to our colleague in Belgium, Joris van der A, at that stage, and he was talking about contacts of his within the police service just being overwhelmed by the amount of information they took off those phones, that the view they had into the underworld was something that was just absolutely startling. And the amount of cocaine coming in, the amount of corruption at the large ports of Antwerp, Rotterdam, etc., was shocking to them. But the Swedes, actually, not the Swiss, the Swedish came out as well. And they all stood together, really, kind of as this force together. And I think it was one of the Swedish police chiefs that said that this was basically like cracking the Nazi code, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And this was an extraordinary moment for European policing. And on the wall behind the press conference, there was a map of Europe and all the countries that had been involved in this second hack.
Yeah.
And Ireland was just the north.
Yeah.
There was we weren't involved. We weren't invited to the table because of the decision that was made in the previous Encrochat hack. And you see, that's what I mean, that there has to be some accountability for it. And you have to kind of surely come out and sort of at least discuss it and not double down and keep pushing the false narrative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, exactly. I mean,
and pushing it out in quite a sneaky way by briefing people,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do agree with you. Like, I mean, they could be good decisions. And look, we know ourselves from journalism that if you get legal advice, it's very tricky to go against it.
But then you just blame the lawyers.
Yeah, but you can come out and share that legal advice. And we saw that, with some of there was another situation with one of the hospitals in where the government repeatedly said, well, this is the advice we were given by the Attorney General. And they shared that advice, or they shared what advice they were given. But the guards haven't maybe done that, and maybe they could say we couldn't act against our legal advice. We were told we shouldn't.
Well, that would be almost perfectly acceptable, and then you'd hold the legal advice to account then, would you not? And you'd say, well, why are we the outrider? Why is everybody else?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just find it incredible that it's just this like elephant in the room.
Yeah.
We don't talk about Encrochat, and it's going to get more and more in the public domain when Liam Byrne is brought back to Liverpool.
Yeah.
And whatever else is going on around himself and Jack Kavanagh's operation, because you can be damn sure there'll be others that will be caught up.
100%. And I mean,
and the evidence of what was going on those phones is going to be given.
And how senior Kinahan members were using it. I mean, we know that, like Thomas Maher, it wasn't just he was transporting, I think it was £1.6 million worth of cocaine, but simultaneously they talked about £1 million of cash being collected from Ireland. That
was the only operation the Gardai got involved in.
Yeah.
And that's because the NCA the NCA being the National Crime Agency in the UK, looked for their assistance because they knew the money was...
Yeah.
It was in Meath, I think.
It was in Meath, and a couple of people were caught red-handed and went to prison.
Yeah. And it was a very, really well carried out Garda operation, I think, involving the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau.
So those guys were caught with that money and they were convicted. The guys in Ireland, and that obviously as a result, ultimately we know because of Thomas Maher's court case that the information came from Encrochat, I suppose, but that wasn't featured in the court case. So I mean, we even if the intelligence is used to catch a number of people, it's not necessarily catching the people who are directing that operation, which Thomas Maher was doing in this case.
Yeah,
because he wasn't caught red-handed with that stuff. So there may well be people in court that have gone through court over the last couple of years caught with certain amounts of cocaine or cash or whatever. But we don't know. And what we do know is the people who are directing those people are not before the courts.
Back to Liam Byrne and off the Garda.
Yeah.
Hammering the guards. And not obviously the beat ones, but certainly the people making the decisions is really what I'm challenging. But back to Liam Byrne, and he is going to fight this extradition, as we know. That'll be handled in Madrid, I think.
Yeah, I think it said that, yeah.
And that's why he was on video link, because he's still in Majorca. So that will happen, and ultimately he will be brought back. I mean, I don't think there's any extradition request been refused through. No,
there hasn't. I mean, I suppose you might say they're a slightly newer treaty, and, because of Brexit.
Buy him a little bit of time, maybe.
It may.
But not much, and undoubtedly he's going to have to go back and face either trial or plead on these charges. But what his problem now is, well, there's multiple problems, but one of them is also that he's going to face another proceeds of crime case.
Yeah.
Like, he's already lost quite an amount here in Ireland and took off to England to sort of build stuff up again. Now, I am aware of quite a lot of investments he's made there, which I'll be writing about in the paper this week.
Yeah.
And I know that they are going to be targeted by police trying to collect the proceeds of crime. But we also know that he has investments abroad. We know of some investments he has near enough to where he was caught in Majorca. And again, we'll detail them in the paper this weekend. But he will be subject to that all over again.
He's subject to that all over. And if he was to be convicted, it becomes a kind of a done deal, doesn't it, in the UK? I mean, it doesn't... you can't sort of fight it, I don't think, can you?
No.
No,
you have to. You're asked to hand up discovery of every asset you have.
Yeah.
And if you do that, they will go through it and come up with an amount, or else they'll seize certain things. If you try and hide stuff, you get punished with more time in prison, which nobody wants. And
it's not kind of a separate procedure, like where if CAB try and seize something here, it doesn't matter if you've, well, maybe it does matter if you've been convicted, but you still get to fight it from ground zero.
Yeah.
In a civil court, in a different procedures, where I think once you get it over there, they just hit you with a bill, don't they? As you get convicted.
Usually, yeah.
So you've got, I think that guy, Liam Cornett, the lamb we were talking about, he just got told you have to hand over 300 grand as he was convicted as well.
Yeah.
And that's that.
Well, the problem for Liam Byrne is also that he has pissed a lot of people off around Liverpool.
Yeah.
And he has been bullying his way around the UK,
Yeah.
and particularly around Liverpool, number of businessmen who don't have any natural connection with organised crime that he has got involved with and about, and he has been trying to use sort of underworld threats within a world that sort of thing doesn't happen. He's also been trying to debt collect frantically back here in Ireland.
Yeah.
I mean, it costs a lot of money to live in Dubai.
Big time. I mean, you don't get the dole over there, do you?
No.
Or rent allowance?
No, you don't get any of those things.
No.
And also, given that there was a warrant in existence for his arrest, there's been a lot of talk about this, that the United Arab Emirates, and, this is clear that there was a warrant in existence for him and they wouldn't hand him back. We don't know, did the UK request him from the Emirates? We do know that the Irish have told the Emiratis for, 14 months that they want Joe McGovern, and there's no sign of him. I get the impression people are beginning to get antsy about the Kinahans. There's a lot of kind of, they're just going to get away with it, they're gone.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's the case.
No, I don't think so. I think the scale that they're operating on,
I think there just has to be patience, and it just feels like there's a lot of patience required for them, but
yeah, I mean, look, it's a mystery that they're not accountable. But there is a reality that people are being extradited from Dubai, and that the Kinahans are coming at a bad time because they do seem to want to clean up their reputation. And the Dubai police officials and the justice officials over there, they are doing a lot of these press conferences and meeting these people and trying to change the perception of Dubai as being a place where dodgy money can survive. I do think they're on a PR drive, and that, as much as anything, that could be a real drawback for Daniel Kinahan and his dad and his brother.
And even though these people are the Kinahans are our number one priority to get them back here, and they have been Dubai has become the world centre for organised crime and money laundering and everything. And these guys are big, and they've been named by the DEA, by the US Treasury, yet they're still only probably a drop in the ocean compared to all the other guys from Australia and Asia, and
Yeah, I was reading interesting things about an Indian drug lord over there. And that's not even to mention all of the Russian oligarch types and Putin associates and all of that stuff that.
Can you imagine working in the office in Dubai where requests came in for, can we have this fella back and this fella back? I'd love that job now. Can you imagine?
It'd be good, all right.
Every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You won't believe it.
Yeah.
It would be good, but I would say you're talking about stacked that high.
Yeah, because look, there's all of that Russian, those Russian assets, they're all floating in there trying to hide away from the sanctions, aren't they? You see it, some of the really good websites, investigative journalist websites. These names are nothing to us, but you just see the funneling of money through there,
And in a way, it's their own doing, because I think they opened the door to organised crime. And what happens then is it floods in and from everywhere, and the word gets around, and all of a sudden you're dealing with your bloody city is populated by
and it's
guys.
it gives a bad rep for the real, which let's remember the real dodgy guys are probably legitimate company, you know what I mean? The legitimate money, so that could be a drawback, It's interesting though, isn't it, that there's no gangland shootings over there, despite all of that, despite of all of those criminals.
Yeah.
Is there ever?
No, absolutely.
And I see there is sort of drug seizures happening over there.
Well, there's drugs definitely, drugs seem to be available everywhere, cocaine and all that.
Yeah.
But within those sort of hotels, no street dealing, obviously.
No, and it's not even the guys who get busted over there. They're never the foreign guys; they're the local guys. But it's incredible. It just shows you, because I think there was a stabbing. Was there? That was meant to be a gangland hit
Really?
over there. Yeah, there was some
Probably
major
a
criminals stabbed.
Drunken thing, though, rather than an
I think
organised.
it was one of these Eastern European guys who was meant to have been stabbed because they couldn't get a gun over to shoot
Right,
him, and
right.
got somebody to do it. But yeah, you wouldn't want to end up in a
No, I
jail
mean,
in Dubai.
if anybody went off on one and started shooting out there,
Yeah.
they'd very quickly round them up, I'd say, and
think so.
bring them in. But yeah, there have been moves being made, and they sound so shallow when we feel we're waiting forever for them to hand back our boys. But there have been. I mean, they have a representative now based in The Hague from the Dubai police. That is a really big, significant gesture. And isn't there an Irish Gardaí member of the guards going to go out to Dubai or become the representative
There is
for
a
Dubai?
representative, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's another massive big change.
Yeah.
You know, they've also seemed to have brought in new tax laws, and you know,
They're definitely
they're moving to change it,
They are.
undoubtedly.
They are, and it does seem to be happening. And they have sent back some of the really big criminal figures from Europe, you know.
Yeah.
But it just seems so hit and miss, doesn't it? Some of them, you know.
So, well, look, we'll leave it at that. I think I've got it out of my system a little
Have
bit.
you?
I think- Well, a little
For another
bit.
couple of months, anyway.
Another couple of hours.
What I
about
say,
the
do you remember I said we're
Encrochat.
never talking about the Regency? What I
Yeah.
say, we're never talking about Encrochat
No,
again.
because I just wouldn't be capable of never talking about Encrochat. I'm going to talk about it until I find, you know, I don't know. I just would like them to sort of be respectful enough to maybe admit that they might have got it wrong
Or defend themselves, I
or
suppose.
defend themselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But as an organisation, I just think that would make such a huge difference if they had the capabilities and the abilities to not circle the wagons on individuals.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be always that, no matter what an individual at a high level in that organisation does, they are protected.
Yeah.
And that is something that was supposed to have been, or was hopeful to have been left behind. And I just don't think that change has been made at all.
No.
Under Drew Harris, you know?
No.
And I mean, in the end of the day, he was also the guy at the top of the tree when this decision was made.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can't always sort of point at the person who actually signed the document.
No.
on it.
I mean, we don't know what happened, of course. That's
He
the
oversaw
reality.
it. And if he didn't oversee that and he didn't know that decision was been made, it's even more worrying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go now. That's me.
Public accountability.
I'm going to go and I'll go and drink now for the weekend. I will. I actually will. I had no drink last weekend. I mean, it was disgraceful, beautiful, sunny weekend it was. And
Yeah. Yes, it is a
you know, I just
disgrace.
need to
Forget about the Encrochat. You're
need to
sober
get my
weekend.
drink. I need to get my drinking back in line.
Yes.
You know? But what about yourself anyway?
Well, you know me, most
Speaking
boring
of,
man now,
yeah.
even if all the Encrochat hacks will prove.
What are you going to do now? Are you going to go jogging and
Go jogging, yeah.
do you still jog so elegantly?
Like a gazelle, yeah.
Have you ever got over the 5K?
No, but no, I don't. No, people will laugh at me because I do the exact same route all the time.
People who know you would just totally get that and understand it.
Yeah.
It's like the lunches.
No, I don't. Why
1 minute
change a
to
winning?
one
Why
time to
change a
go.
winning formula?
Well, maybe just sort of increase.
I'm going to go home. I'm going to go for a jog and clean my house.
Yeah.
Get a nice early night.
Okay. And the Chinese takeaway.
No.
You got over that?
Yeah, I got over that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a
But no,
party central, you know.
I mean, it's about 5 years you did Couch to 5K, isn't it?
Yeah, and I kept going.
You still kept going on the 5K?
Yeah, but in those 5 years,
Yeah. What?
I haven't gone. I've
You haven't gone 6K.
but I haven't missed a week either.
Yeah, but have you not kind of,
No, I've stuck with a winning formula.
yeah. How long does it take you?
Well, I don't. This is another thing that people don't believe. I don't time myself.
But you must know it takes you about half an hour.
I don't
20
time
minutes,
myself
10.
because I could only. Why do I need to time myself?
Well, you time yourself for everything else.
Because
I
there's
mean,
people.
if
Emer
it hits
Rabbit.
5
Emer Rabbit
past
says
1.
you have to be timing yourself because you have to try and think I'm going to do it 30 seconds.
But you live by the clock. If it hits 5 past 1, you go into a meltdown because you haven't you're not somewhere for your lunch.
That's no. I'm happy with myself.
Stop making out that you're kind of relaxed about timings and stuff like that.
No, but I haven't missed a week because I don't think about it. I just do the same thing over and over again.
I'd say now, if you got yourself a little personal trainer or something that could get you up even to 6K.
You see, that's the way you
Have you
think.
no ambition for that?
No, I've no ambition because I'm happy. See, the other people, there's boom and bust fitness people all over our office. People, they come in on January. I'm going to do this. I got a fitness trainer. I'm up at 6 o'clock now.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Fitness boom. Bust by February.
I know.
I just keep plodding along.
I plod as well now. I keep doing, I cycle, and I told you I've taken to skipping.
Yeah.
Would you not take up skipping? I'll buy you a rope.
I don't like doing anything new, Nicola. I'm just going to continue to do what I do now, probably till the day I die.
I don't know.
You'll try your skipping. You'll give it up. You'll be back on
I
the
won't
drink.
give that up.
You'll be
No, I won't give up
back
the
on the
skipping.
drink.
I like the
You'll
skipping.
come
I
back
get this kind of like, I love that. It just gets all that
for the moment.
energy.
Then you'll be out in the. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's very good. I know. It's me. Me and skipping is a marriage. We really. It's that really high.
Yeah, no. But skipping is impressive.
Yeah, no, it's very
I'm
impressive.
not very coordinated though, so
Weightlifting and everything. But anyway, sure, we're just
waffling on now, aren't
fitness
we?
freaks. Right. Well, listen. I'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.